Good afternoon, everyone. And if you are here, hooray and welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so pleased that you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. I am your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 13, going on 14 novels of suspense. The current one is Her Perfect Life, displayed behind me. And the newest one is called The House Guest, which will be out in February. And I'm very thrilled about that. The House Guest is sort of Gaslight meets Thelma and Louise, if you can think about what that might be. But today in the spotlight, we have the joy of having the fabulous Louise Hare with her debut in the US, Miss Aldridge Regrets, which you all is quite an incredible, unique book. As I said, it's fabulous and it's glamorous. A locked room mystery on the Queen Mary in 1936 and starring a jazz singer. And I ask you, is that not the most irresistible description you have ever heard? And I've been singing ever since I started reading this, not out loud. As you know, I'm a disaster as a singer, but the songs that are referred to in this book and the music in the book and the whole milieu is absolutely, it is riveting. It is marvelous. I'm obsessed with this book, and I will tell you, and Louise will tell you about it in a minute. Happy Pub Day, Louise. Happy US debut day.
Thank you.
This is in London, where it's 1,000,000 degrees, and where it's, tell us a little about what it's like in London right now.
Well, there's just been some torrential rain, so I'm hoping it's going to cool down a little bit. It was 40 degrees Celsius early today, which I think is the hottest the UK's ever been.
Which is 104 Fahrenheit, something like that. It's really, really crazy hot. Pamela Fry-Priest is here, along with so many other people who are here today, saying it's wonderful. And Shannon Hansen says, great cover. And so many people are joining us today to hear about Miss Aldridge Regrets. When I look over here, you all, I'm looking at the comments to check out who is here and what you all are saying. Speaking of comments, the fabulous Fiona Davis says, in Lena Aldridge, Hare has created a heroine who practically leaps off the page with her sharp wit and incandescence. Throw in a jazz age ocean crossing on the Queen Mary and a series of diabolical murders that would make Agatha Christie proud. And Fiona says, and I was done for, turning the pages into the late night, irresistible this book is, and smart. Louise, what did you think when you read that?
Sort of overwhelmed. I guess it's always when you write a book, you never know how it's going to be received because obviously your editors tell you they love it, but then until other people start to read it, you kind of you kind of had that sort of worry, like what if people don't get it, like what if it's just not it's not what I hoped it would be, or so I was just really overwhelmed, really happy obviously that someone like Fiona would enjoy my writing.
It is interesting because although this is your US debut, and we'll talk about that in a minute, you are an incredibly well-established author in the UK with a brilliant, brilliant track record. So even an author with that stature, you still worry?
Yeah, I think because I haven't written crime in this way before. Like I would say, this is definitely it's like a full-on murder mystery, locked room scenario, whereas my previous novel was more about, there was a murder in it, but it was more about the impact on the community. So I guess it was a little bit more literary. So I guess, when you try something different, you sort of hope that you can still pull it off.
Well, you did indeed. You are so lucky to be here today to hear about Miss Aldridge Regrets by Louise Hare. And Louise is generously giving away a copy of Miss Aldridge Regrets to one lucky questioner. Leave a question for Louise in the comments, and you will be entered to win a copy of this book. Ask her a question about her life and where she lives. She's in London right now, and what her research was, or what her ideas for the characters were, or how much she loves music. And we'll talk about all that as well, including your questions, how she writes, and all those kinds of things. If you are new to A Mighty Blaze, let me take 2 seconds to tell you. A Mighty Blaze was founded more than 2 years ago at the beginning of the pandemic by the fabulous powerhouse crew of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt. And now that with several dozen volunteers, we gather together every week, every day, to bring you authors and books and book chat and discussion and let you talk to your favorite authors or maybe meet a new one. And our goal, of course, is to have your to be read piles grow and grow and grow and grow. And we hope you will add Miss Aldridge Regrets to that pile, maybe even read it first. Let me tell you quickly about Louise Hare with her formal bio. Louise Hare is a London-based writer who has an MA in creative writing from Birkbeck University of London. Originally from Warrington, the capital is the inspiration for much of her work, including This Lovely City, which we were referring to earlier, which came to life after a trip to the deep level shelter beneath the Clapham Common. So fascinating. This Lovely City was featured on the inaugural BBC Two book club show Between the Covers, so prestigious, and has received multiple accolades, securing Louise's place as an author to watch. And you are lucky you get to watch her today. And this is her U.S. debut, Miss Aldridge Regrets. Miss Aldridge Regrets stars Lena Aldridge. To begin with, tell us a little bit about Lena.
So Lena is in her sort of mid-20s, and I suppose I was sort of channeling my own experiences at that age. I mean, not in terms of the murders, but in terms of she feels like quite lost. She had all these great ambitions when she was young, and she wanted to be basically a big West End star. She's primarily a jazz singer. She can act as well. But everything's sort of fallen apart. Things haven't worked out. And she's sort of been left singing in this kind of dingy nightclub in Soho in London. And so, yeah, she's kind of stuck in a rut. And then she gets this great opportunity, which is she gets offered this Broadway role and a first-class ticket on the Queen Mary. And so it sort of wakes her up a little bit and thinks, oh, maybe there's still a chance for me. Maybe it's not all lost.
I love that, the hope that you imbue her with from singing in the Canary Club, which is so perfect, to first class on the Queen Mary and a potential Broadway role. And that's amazing. Anissa is here. I see. That's marvelous. Let's talk about that, though. Where did this jazz age on the Mary, where did this book come from? Was there a domino that fell that gave you a hint of the idea?
So as you read in my bio, I did a master's in creative writing. And so this sort of evolved from a short story that I wrote one semester. And the topic for that semester was to look at genre fiction. So we were looking at historical crime and also YA fiction. And so I had to write a short story in one or both, one or two of those genres. So I picked historical crime. And so I wrote this short story that was based in a jazz club about a jazz singer, and she witnesses a murder. And I think I love jazz. My first book also had a jazz musician in. So I think it sort of continued through to this book. So I had so much fun with the music and listening to the music as I was writing. But also because I was reading for the course a lot of Agatha Christie and Patricia Highsmith. I really love that sort of nostalgic feel. But obviously they were writing in their own time. But I just loved it. And I also love Poirot, the TV series with David Suchet. Like I could waste a whole day just sort of watching those. I love the glamour of it. The fancy dresses and everyone's just standing around drinking martinis, waiting to get murdered. So I kind of just wanted to create that atmosphere. That's
not wasted time, Louise. That's valuable research time. Absolutely so. And then, how did it blossom into this fully formed novel? That little snippet.
Yeah. So at the end of the original short story, I had my character who turned into Lena. I don't think she was called Lena in the original story. She was leaving the club with basically her one bag that she had, and she had a ticket for to New York. She was going to head to get the train down to Southampton to catch the boat. And my tutor was like, "You can't end it there because a short story has to be it has to have an end. The reader needs to be satisfied with the end, but you've literally sort of set it up to continue." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And it was, it took a couple of months of sort of thinking, okay, well, what could happen to this woman? And then obviously if you want it to still be crime, that means there have to be murders on the ship. So then what's going on? What's this bigger scheme? So I took a bit of time to figure it out, but I got there in the end.
I mean, it's interesting though, because there are sort of two parallel murder cases going on at the time in this book, and we can talk about the structure in a minute, but the idea of setting yourself up to write a murder mystery on the Queen Mary, which is the locked room, essential locked room mystery, because someone on that boat is a murderer, which Lena says from time to time that she's potentially having dinner with a murderer. Did you figure out the plot in advance? Did you know what you were going to write?
Not exactly. I knew a couple of the victims from the beginning. And yeah, I'm definitely, I guess what they would call a pantser rather than a plotter. I tend to follow the characters and see how they evolve, because they always do. They always change. So there are certain characters. Dr. Wilding is one. So he's sort of at the dinner table with Lena. He's part of that group of people, but he's not part of the sort of rich set. He's being paid to do a job. And he wasn't really supposed to be in it much, but he sort of took over a little bit. So he's in it quite a lot more than I anticipated. But I kind of love that. I like sort of seeing where these people go. So yeah, in fact, I actually, in the first draft, it was a different murderer.
Oh,
because I got to the end and I was like, actually, I don't think it was them. I think it was this other person. I've
had that happen, and I've talked to other authors who have had that happen. Why do you think that is? That the characters come to life?
Yeah, I guess, but maybe because I'm not a plotter, I get bored like sitting in front of a spreadsheet, or it feels too much like sort of work. I mean, obviously it is work, I get paid to do it, but it feels too dry to me to do that. I kind of just need to write. And so when I start, I don't really know the characters that well. And I guess it's like making friends. You might start off with one impression of somebody, but then actually once you sit down and have a conversation, you might like them less, you might like them more. And it's the same. I just find it's the same thing. And that's, I guess it's just what works for me when I'm writing, is just to sort of get to know these people and then see what they're capable of.
Exactly. And we're talking about Miss Aldridge Regrets, and you will meet these people, some of them on the Queen Mary, some of them in the Canary Club. The people that you write, the thing that reveals who they are to me and to you as we're writing, is what they do when presented with an obstacle, what they do when they're presented with a problem, what decisions they make reveals their personality and their characters. Did that kind of thing surprise you along the way? What your characters decided?
Yeah, I think definitely. And I was actually quite surprised, because especially with Lena, because she changes quite a lot over the course of the novel. And I'm really happy about that. It wasn't, I hadn't really planned it that way, but I feel like she's someone who she does make a lot of mistakes all the way through the book, but she kind of is finding herself at the same time, and learning how to sort of deal with all these people that are very different to her. I mean, she's an actress, so she's also sort of playing a part. But yeah, it was. I find it really interesting, and the people that she, I guess, became allies with weren't necessarily people that I had anticipated her becoming allies with either, and the things that they did and said. So yeah.
Oh no, it's fascinating. You did a brilliant job. This is absolutely an immersive page turner of a book, and it is seething with conflict and seething with deception and secrets. One of which is that Lena is trying to keep from people that she's passing as white. And you really make us understand, as much as we can understand, that constant battle that she's having at the beginning, especially with herself and with her presentation. Talk a little bit about what that was like to write.
Yeah, so the reason that I wanted her to be sort of biracial but passing was because when I started writing this in 2019, the British media especially were still full of, Meghan Markle and, is it racism if she sort of looks white and, all that kind of thing. And I don't know, it just really annoyed me. And I wanted to express that through Lena. And I think identity is always something that I've struggled with as well, even though I wouldn't pass in most situations. So yeah, it just really interested me. And I wanted to see I guess, how she dealt with everything. But then it was also interesting considering, you know, she's on the ship, she's traveling in first class. So it's kind of really important that she passes as white because, you know, a lot of those passengers at that time would not have wanted her to be, you know, in that environment with them. So yeah, and then but then I also felt because so Will Goodman, who ends up becoming like her sort of closest person on the ship, and they have a little bit of a romance. Again, he wasn't planned. He sort of popped up. So the first scene that he's in, I was just sort of sat on my laptop and I was like, she needs someone who recognizes her. She needs someone to talk to, otherwise it's going to be the most miserable crossing. So he sort of pops up and he recognizes her. He recognizes that she's biracial, and at first she's really scared that he could, you know, destroy this sort of setup that she's created for herself. But then, you know, she realizes actually this is one person that I can talk to about things.
And in as I was reading the book, and when we met Will, and he recognizes that she's passing, and we wonder instantly, is this a good guy or a bad guy? I mean, there is a really crystalline moment of conflict right there, where we feel how Lena feels about that. I mean, you set this not in Meghan Markle time, but in 1936, where those attitudes were of the time. How did you research what it would have felt like for her? Or did you? Or was that from inside you?
Yeah, I mean, I used some of my own experiences a little bit. But I was thinking about sort of things that I had read about things, you know, Black people in their experiences, even in London in the 1930s. So there's a scene where Lena goes to the Savoy Hotel, which is, you know, a beautiful hotel on the Strand in London. And she goes there to meet the person who's offered her this opportunity. And the reason that I picked the Savoy was because in the 30s, I think in 1932, there was the actor Paul Robeson, who was African-American, but he spent a lot of time in the UK because it was sort of slightly less racist, and he could get sort of higher profile work in the theatres in London. And he was playing a role at the Savoy Theatre, which is next door to the Savoy Hotel. And someone one night invited him to eat with them, to dine with them at the Savoy. And they turned him away because he was Black, because there were guests there that would be upset. And you think, you know, this guy was so famous at the time, literally working in the theatre next door with people queuing up to see him every night. And so I just wanted to send her there, knowing that, you know, and she had that knowledge. And I guess, yeah, just to see it through her eyes, you know, this sort of fear of being caught out. I mean, that's one of the things that she's sort of battling, is this idea that, because obviously she was really close to her father, who has just died. So she's also grieving through a lot of this book. And yeah, she feels sort of guilty about passing because he couldn't.
And you do this so beautifully, because as you were saying earlier, part of the book is about Lena's growth and her understanding of herself and her milieu, and this is where she begins in the book on the Queen Mary, where in this whole book, which is about class and race and how we deal with each other, where class is literally stamped on your ticket, what class you are, which I thought was just quite brilliant of you, to use that upstairs, downstairs, the two different worlds, the division in this closed community of everybody thinks they know who everybody is, but they may not know. Was that fun to write?
It was really fun. So when I was researching, I found this book by a guy who was a crew member right from the maiden voyage. So, you know, he was talking about what it was like in the 1930s on the ship. And he literally, I mean, it was like, this book is amazing. Like, I mean, it was one of the reasons that I chose the Queen Mary, because my original plan was to just create my own ship. But then once I realized that, you know, the Queen Mary, you know, literally began sailing in around the time that I wanted, it seemed crazy not to just use it, because there were so many pictures. I mean, he had all of the gossip, you know, what used to go on behind closed doors, and you know, everything. There were pictures of all the rooms, all the cabins, and, you know, the dining room. And so, yeah, I had access to all of this. And because obviously he was a crew member, there was also information on the pick and whistle, which is like the crew sort of sort of a pub. I mean, it's literally, they've created their own bar out of crates or whatever.
It's really called the Pig and Whistle, the way it is in the book.
Yeah, and I think there are still Pig and Whistle pubs on some of the Cunard ships actually today. Like they've sort of kept that sort of memory of bygone times.
But again, the class thing. So she knows that she's cabin class or first class, and everybody is labeled, and there are places that people don't go or can't go or would never go, and yet she crosses the line into places that other people wouldn't go or shouldn't go. Talk a little bit about that moment. I mean, there's a moment in the book where she opens the door of the Pig and Whistle and realizes where she is and who she's with. That really kind of is heartbreaking.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I loved about Lena is that she's of the lower classes, and she's not just passing racially, she's passing in terms of her class as well, because I mean, I guess, still today, if you get celebrity, then that sort of elevates you above your class. And so she's sort of riding that same wave, but she can go to the Pig and Whistle, and actually, in a way, she feels more comfortable because they're people like her. They're people doing, she's with the musicians, and, those would have been the people that she was hanging out with in London. So yeah, I think it's interesting seeing it through her eyes because, she has the freedom. Firstly, she has the first class ticket, which meant that you could go anywhere. Whereas obviously if you were lower class, you were restricted in where you could go. But also because she's, I guess, spent her adult life learning how to fit into all these different scenarios, she can sort of get away with being in any part of the ship, and she can fit in.
And her let me just read you all a little bit of what Louise wrote about that part of the book. And I'm going to take some proper nouns and make them into pronouns so that we don't give anything away. This is in the midst of the trip. I must have walked miles around the ship since leaving Southampton, and yet I once again found myself treading new ground as I wound my way down through tourist class to where he had asked me to wait for him. A privilege of the higher priced tickets was the ability to roam the ship at will while being able to bar the cabin class doors to those less fortunate. A visible representation of real life. My relationship with another person had taken me to places where I wouldn't have been allowed over the threshold but for his presence by my side, whereas he was free to enter any backstreet club or dingy pub that he felt like at any time. And we just think, oh, that's just so beautifully stated. This seems like one part of the essence of the book.
Yeah, I didn't set out to talk about class, but I think just doing the research on the ship, it seemed a no-brainer because that environment is completely segregated. And so, and then comparing Lena to the Abernathy family, who are, the rich family that she meets on board. I just thought it was a really fun way to sort of explore those different areas of the ship and sort of show, what was going on and what life was like all over the ship.
And let me just read you all another little part, because the thing that makes it even more wonderful is how terrific Lena is and how her personality evolves throughout the book. Let me just read you another little part of this. Someone is telling her about someone else, and she is told, he has a thing for girls like you. And she says, girls like me? The warning tone in my voice had clearly not penetrated James's hungover haze. He refers to you as the dusky beauty. He snorted a laugh. He likes a taste of the exotic, that's all. Then he should buy himself a parrot, I snapped. Besides, how the hell does he know what I am? And that retort, that response, is her finding herself. I just got goosebumps reading it to you. Is that part of her evolution?
Yeah, definitely. She's kind of, I guess she's just kind of torn. Like she's trying to get ahead and she's trying to be ambitious, but she's been knocked down so many times. And yeah, I mean, I love writing her. It's so much fun to write. Because she is kind of, I I guess, cheeky. Like she's not afraid to say what she thinks.
When she gets the courage to do so. Sometimes she just thinks it, and we know it, which is great. So here is this struggling young woman, a singer, actor on the Queen Mary, with a first-class ticket for circumstances you'll discover when you read the fabulous Miss Aldridge Regrets, hoping for a Broadway role, and she finds something else on board, including one murder and then another. Talk a little bit about if you had to describe this book to someone, how would you describe it?
I guess I describe it primarily it's I guess tribute to the golden age of crime. I really wanted to create that atmosphere, but I also wanted to meld in the psychology because I love Patricia Highsmith so much. I wanted to look at the characters a little bit more. So I guess, a sort of golden age murder mystery that's character driven.
And also music, I mean, perfectly done, actually. Let me just say, in my opinion, I adored it, as I've been saying way too many times. It's also held together by music. And you have cleverly, I marked a couple of places here so I can show you all. Sections of the book, there's the structure, I know I can finish a sentence. The structure of this book is gorgeous. There is what happens on the Queen Mary, and there's what happens in the Canary Club, and there are sort of interstitial talks by someone who might be a bad person. We don't quite know who that is. But also the chapters the parts are marked by songs throughout, which are, and I'll show you one more, which are meaningful to the book. So Louise, tell us about why you did that and how you chose the songs and whether you did it first or after and how music plays such a marvelous part in this book.
Yeah, so the music was always important because I was starting with Lena as being a jazz singer. So I was thinking about, I don't know, I feel like music is really nostalgic. It can really take you to a place, to a time. So I wanted to do that. But also I wanted to think about, you can hear a song that you haven't heard for years and it will remind you of something or of someone. So I wanted to use that in terms of her memory, especially when it came to her father. And I mean, in terms of choosing the sort of the headings, I would really wanted to sort of pick something that fit what was happening in the novel at the time. So I think I did it on the second draft so that I knew what was happening in each section. And I checked that all of the songs would have been recorded before this voyage took place. So they are all, 30s or might even be one from the 20s.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I just chose songs that I really like and songs that I could play as I was writing. So, lots of Ella Fitzgerald versions and sometimes newer ones. I love Gregory Porter's voice, so sometimes I play like newer ones.
Because you had to know these songs. You had to not the reader, but you had to be familiar with these songs in order to find exactly the right ones. I mean, has music been a part of your life as well?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up playing piano and clarinet all the way through to the end of high school. I don't play as much anymore, but I listen to music every day. And I need to, when I'm reading or when I'm writing, I always have music on. It doesn't even bother me if there are lyrics. So, because I know a lot of writers are like, oh no, I need like ambient music with no lyrics, but I can listen to anything. It just needs to be something, and ideally something that's evocative of the period that I'm writing in.
Well, you chose perfectly. This is my favorite era of song, and I have spent many, 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 many hours listening to Ella Fitzgerald sings the Cole Porter Songbook. So you can see why this book spoke to me so gorgeously. And I found myself one morning singing Miss Otis Regrets, and I thought, why is that song in my head? And you will see now why the song was in my head. And I really started laughing when I realized, was this always the title? How did you come to that?
No, the title was really painful. And it seems really obvious now because I thought I wanted to have it something to do with the music. And so I wrote a list of song titles. And Miss Otis Regrets was even on the list right from the beginning. And I don't know, it was, for some reason, it was like a year later that I suddenly was like, oh, it's been there the whole time, and I just need to change Miss Otis to Miss Aldridge. So yeah, it was really difficult. Titles are always the worst. Titles are always the thing that I come to last. So I have a working title usually, but it's, you know, it's rubbish. Like it's just so I can save the document.
Exactly. I'm convinced, and I tell myself with every book when I can never figure out the title, that the title is in there somewhere. And if I just keep writing the book about the thing, that the title will evolve from something that someone in the book says, something like that. So it's just sort of that part of that writer faith that you'll eventually get it. And as you said, and the you know, another bit of magic is that you had the title, you just didn't know it. And that's so funny. Yeah. And you were talking about, did I read that this is going to be the first in a series?
Yeah, so I'm just editing the follow-up, which is going to be set in New York. So it's obviously at the end of the voyage. Lena arrives in New York, and it's about the first couple of weeks. So, I mean, it literally starts on the day that this book finishes and then sort of carries on for the next couple of weeks.
So we know that Lena makes it across on the Queen Mary, of course, and we don't need to, that's no spoiler. We know that's going to happen. Oh my golly, you all will love this book, The Voyage of Lena Aldridge on the Queen Mary. And she's in the midst of murders. You know what, let me go back to one more thing. So I was talking about the structure of the book, the parallel structure of the book, because it's not only murders that happen on the Queen Mary, but there are murders that happen in London just before she left. And the weaving of those two stories together is marvelous too, and the structure is brilliant. How was it to balance the two elements of the book?
Yeah, I think it was less tricky than it could have been, because my previous novel had not the same structure, but something similar-ish. So that when I came to this and was like, okay, I think I want to show what happens in London. Because otherwise it was like, oh, I've either got this whole big backstory thing, which is boring, or I write it as if it's just a different timeline, which is more interesting. And obviously there are characters that are in one timeline that aren't in the other. So yeah, I found that, I mean, I basically wrote the Soho scenes in one go, and then sort of divided them up. But yeah, actually, essentially the coming together of the two was a little bit trickier. Once I'd finally figured out who the murderer was, then you've got to kind of go, okay, so how did they engineer all of this? So yeah, it got a bit trickier at the end, but I had so much fun because her life in London is so different to the life she's living on the Queen Mary. She's living in this rubbish boarding house with this landlady who basically kicks her out. And I love writing the scenes with her best friend Maggie, who also has her own stuff going on. So
I mean, that's what I was almost going to say is that when you allow us into Lena's life in London, we see what kind of a person she is, that she's loyal and she's a good friend and she's brave and patient and persistent, and she has dreams. And we wouldn't necessarily know that from just having the Queen Mary part. So that's a sneaky way for us to get to know her and love her right away, and be sort of in her heart and in her brain really, and show how she progresses and how she sees the world. I mean, that the Canary Club is so perfect. And did you make that up?
Yeah, I mean, I did a lot of research because, I mean, Soho at that time was so much fun. It's the kind of place that anyone went to. I mean, it was one of those places where there were no barriers. So, there were gay clubs. There were clubs where everyone would go. So you'd get sort of lords and ladies sort of slumming it for the evening and then hanging out with the black musicians. And so I just kind of like that atmosphere, which is why I wanted to include it in the first place. And so the Canary Club just sort of evolved out of that idea, because there was a lot of corruption going on, and like there was lots of sort of illegal things happening, shall we say, and a lot of the times the police might be involved. There was some corruption going on, so I kind of just wanted to have a bit of fun with all of those elements. But I didn't want to get sued, so I was like, I'm going to create my own club.
Good idea. Good idea. It is so much fun. This is absolutely a joy to read, and I can't wait to read the second Canary Club mystery. What did you call it? The Canary Club mysteries?
Honestly, we were struggling because I think the publisher originally we was going to call it the Lena Aldridge mysteries, but I think the comment was that it's a bit too generic or a bit too boring. And although the Canary Club isn't strictly speaking going to be in the second novel, if I get to write a third, then it will feature very heavily because I'm going to bring it back. So yeah,
I love it. I think it's terrific, and it is so timely and so evocative. You all will love Miss Aldridge Regrets. As I said, we are giving away, Louise is generously giving away a copy of Miss Aldridge Regrets. As I say, not this one because I am keeping it. So let's have your questions, you all. So many people came to hear Louise today. Let's hear some of your questions for Louise before we let her go back into stormy London. I know it must be. Is that lightning that's happening outside?
Possibly. Yeah. I'll just ignore that.
Shannon Hanson, our darling Shannon, is saying, do you have a favorite jazz band or musician?
Oh, it's really hard. I mean, I tend, like, quite often I'll just put on like a jazz radio station and sort of listen to everything. But I think I said before, I love Gregory Porter's voice. I think it's just so smooth and yeah.
I love that sound. Are you a good singer?
I can hold a tune. I've never sung professionally or anything, but yeah, I used to sing in school and stuff in choirs and different groups.
And I think someone had asked earlier, Priya is saying, did you have to get permission to use the song lyrics?
Well, I don't have any lyrics. If I'd used lyrics, I would have, but song titles you can use. So yeah, I learned how to skate around.
I'm rewriting the book in my head and thinking, are there lyrics?
There are not, because I don't want to pay for them.
It's so funny because the lyrics are just going through my head. So if you know the songs, you will hear it. You will hear the music of this book.
They're all jazz standards. So yeah, I mean, you can find them easily if you want to listen to them. And yeah, I think they're pretty well known.
Are you making a playlist? Would you put together a playlist?
There might be one on Spotify, potentially. I know my UK publisher did do one. I don't know if it's still up, but you could probably check out.
You can go through the songs that are listed in your chapter headings and your section headings and play all those, and you cannot go wrong with those songs.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely. I think we have time for one more question. Does someone have one more question? I think I saw one up a bit ago. A ship crossing is quite the liminal space to set a mystery. And do any of your characters step out of their normal behavior patterns as a result? Come on, it's a ship. What do you think? Talk a little bit about that. What a great question.
Yeah, I mean, there's a really obvious answer, but it's a spoiler. So yeah, I mean, it's tricky. I would say probably all of them do. Because of circumstances, but I can't talk about it.
There you have a question. There you have an answer. A mystery novel. Although I do want to say that there is a scene at one point, and we know there's a murder, and people are mourning, and some people are not that mournful. And Lena says people don't seem as unhappy as they might, something like that. And someone says death on a ship, death at sea is not unusual. And then someone else says, but murder is. Another but fabulous scene from Louise Hare in the fabulous Miss Aldridge Regrets. Louise, thank you so much for being here. I know it's late in London and you're in a thunderstorm, but we are so grateful that you're here today.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been really fun.
Good. Happy Pub Day. And you all, I'm sure that you have not been able to resist. I'm sure some of you are buying it right now online, but let's spin the wheel of fun and see who wins a copy of Miss Aldridge Regrets. As I promise you, I will not sing. I will not sing it. And here we see who is going to win. And the winner is... no, that's a mighty blaze. We can't win our own book. We already have a copy of this book. We're spinning it one more time. And the winner is Elizabeth. No. Okay, it's slowing down. Anissa. Oh, how marvelous. Anissa, I know you absolutely will love this book. Anissa, will you put in the comments, if you already have this book, I wonder if you might. People are laughing because, as I said earlier, Louise, in our earlier session with Paula Meunier, we spun the wheel of fun 2 times, and both the Mighty Blaze. I think it wants us to have us win, but we are all winners for being with you this afternoon. Thank you. And Anissa is saying, I do not have it. Perfect reader. Louise, if you don't know Anissa, she is a joy and a wonderful reviewer. And if she loves a book, she will tell everyone, and she will no doubt love Miss Aldridge Regrets. Before I let you all go, speaking of authors you love, look who's going to be here next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET. Megan Miranda. Megan Miranda, one of all of our favorite authors, absolutely an auto buy. And her new book, The Last to Vanish, is out. And look at that cover. The Last to Vanish, with a vanishing point on the very cover. So do not miss this next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET when we bring you Megan Miranda's The Last to Vanish. And Megan herself, of course, will be here to talk, just as Louise was here today. Oops. You can tell this book is just red and red and red. It's flopping over.
I just hold mine up.
Oh, yes. Here, this is the UK absolutely gorgeous hardcover version, which doesn't see it has 2 covers. Tell us hold them up again. One more time.
So the US and then the UK. The UK is a bit more orange and blue. You probably can't see it that well in the light.
That's great. I'm going closer to the computer as if that's going to help me see it. It will not. It will not. Louise, you are marvelous, and we are so grateful that you were here with us today. Thank all of you, so many people who were here today to celebrate Miss Aldridge Regrets. And Louise Hare's debut in the U.S. And we welcome you with absolutely open arms and delight. And I'm seeing, when does a Mighty Blaze happen? Mighty Blaze is all the time on Facebook. Crime Time is always Tuesdays at 4 p.m. ET. And we will see you next time. And until then, remember, it's always safe inside a book. And we will see you next time.